What a gift to have you here, to remember Sam Pate, and to love Nan. What a gift they are to our lives, what a gift they have been, and what a gift they always will be. The words of the hymn writer are so appropriate. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise. The morning light, the lily white, declare the Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear Him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. The hymn writer's words echo the spirit of the genesis and development of the world and of humankind. From the holy book of Genesis, we read the words, "In beginning God proceeded to create the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." From there we see how God's creation came into being, crowned with the creation of humanity. He took the dust of the earth, He formed a human, He breathed His own breath into that body, and that body became a living soul. And then He took that new creation and He commissioned it to be a steward of everything He had made. The Scripture says, God blessed them, that which He created, humanity. And He said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over every living creature that moves on the ground." And God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed in it. They'll all be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. Sam Pate is one of those people who got it. He got that commission from God right. And he lived his whole life being a steward of the world that God gave to him. He saw God's new creation day by day, awakening to explore, teach, and encourage others to fully immerse themselves in the wonders of God's world, protecting it and enjoying it. He not only communicated with God's constantly new creation, he also helped others do the same. From understanding the language of the barred owl, to identifying the birds and animals along the path, to watching a Maine sunrise, to sipping the crisp air of a new day, all who crossed Sam's path began to see the world from a new perspective. Like Alan Rothschild wrote to me, this weekend son Alan, also one of Sam's students, and I were fishing in the Yellowstone area when a bald eagle flew so low over Alan's head that he could hear the wind through its feathers before he ever saw the bird. No doubt in my mind that this majestic bird was carrying some of Sam's spirit to the great beyond. While sad to have Sam leave us, it is special to learn of the loss in a place so meaningful to him, and one that I first visited with Sam over our western journey. In symbol, we lay Sam to rest today as he entered heaven, and we will miss him beyond words. But we understand the world in a better way because he lived. We understand how to care for this world in a different way because he lived and taught us. He inspired new generations to see the wonder and simplicity of the world, and Sam's gone to heaven. However, this morning, Sam's legacy of influence and teaching arose to go to a bench and dispense justice, to enter an operating room and perform a surgery, to represent a client, to stand in front of a classroom and teach, inspiring a room full of students as had he, to conduct business in an ethical and environmentally appropriate way, to stand on the back porch at the rising of the sun and know the voices of the morning, to take a young person on a trip and introduce her to the wonder of a creation that is always being created anew. Indeed, Sam Pate arose in the lives of those whom he had influenced, and he continues to help them be a steward of the world God entrusted to him, and he bequeathed that spirit to generations beyond any that he would ever meet personally, but whom he would always influence. Now here's some of the voices as different individuals share reminiscences, others play beloved music, and all are recommissioned as stewards of this amazing world. Will you bow with me? Spirit of God, visit us in these moments. Remind us of the commission you gave that was taught to us by Sam Pate, that this world is precious and it is a crown jewel of what your heart holds dear. And you entrusted it to us, your children, to love it and to care for it, to enjoy it to the full. May we learn something and be inspired anew today. In your precious name, amen.
Thanks to Mr. Sam Pate, I have traveled all over this country, from the Florida Keys to Alaska to most every state in between, and Maine, especially Maine. I did not go to Brookstone School, and so I did not have the good fortune of having Sam Pate as a teacher, but I did sit at his feet for the past 3 years. His stories were rich and plentiful and interesting, and when he would say, "Tell me if I've told you this before," of course, I didn't have the nerve to say, "Yes, I've already heard it." I would listen again as if for the very first time. His stories took me to all the places he once drove. I have been to some of them myself, but nowhere near all, so I used my imagination. How many thousands of miles did he drive? How many stories did he tell those boys? For so many summers, he took students from Brookstone on massive field trips. Getting tapped for those trips must have been quite a privilege. Sam never said that as if he were some big shot, but I've thought in recent days what an honor it would have been to travel in that station wagon to see his classroom come to life. Here's just one summer story. He was driving some students through a national park out west, and he somehow spotted George Romney, Mitt Romney's father, driving in the other direction. George Romney was once the governor of Michigan. As soon as he could, Sam whipped around that car, and of course the boys wondered what he was up to. "That was George Romney," he said. He was so excited. One boy wanted to see him up close, so Sam dropped him off at the spot where he believed Mr. Romney would be, and the boy got out, and he found him and came back to say he was so glad to have met George Romney. That's just one example of Mr. Sam Pate being at the right place at the right time. As a chaplain at Columbus Hospice, I got to know deeply what Sam believed. Although, as you know, Sam was not a preacher, he was a storyteller. His stories told me that he believed in the goodness of God because what he described were magical places. As Jimmy has alluded, from the very opening of the book of Genesis, we learn that what God created was good. Mr. Sam Pate let me know in many, many words that the cycle of the earth and its rhythms are very good. From the arrowheads he collected as a boy in South Alabama, to the rim of the Grand Canyon, to the wild coast of Maine, and to the endless, lonely stretches of Alaskan highway. The Maine native, Henry David Thoreau, encouraged all of us to suck the marrow out of life, enjoy its beauty and its bounty. It's as if God's very self proclaimed, "Mr. Sam Pate, here is my world. Study it. Dig in the dirt. Look at the stars. Rescue Labradors. Be a good steward. And teach others until your very last breath." As Sam often commented, what a weird, weird world. Amen.
I'm going to read Psalm 24, one of the Psalms of David, from the Bible that Sam's mother gave his father for his birthday in 1980. They were my great aunt and uncle. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts, he is the King of glory.
When I think of Sam Pate, I think of his quiet individualism, his unpretentious confidence. It was not that he was marching to a different drummer. He was the drummer. I think of his subtle humor. I think of his constant wonder at the varieties of birds and of animals and of people. I think of the many times that he traveled by car or by thumb from Ashford to Dothan, Alabama, the hub city of the wiregrass, the peanut capital of the world, to visit us city cousins. We played football, baseball, and basketball. We raced bicycles. Sammy, and he was Sammy back then, Sammy was the biggest, but we had flexible rules to accommodate the land that was available and the limited abilities of the younger one, me. In high school, he spent hours searching for arrowheads along creeks and the plowed fields around Ashford, nurturing a passion for the outdoors and an attachment to a time and a place that he always cherished. I do not subscribe to the rumor that some of his stories were factually enhanced, but he did have the ability to create an event which became a memory for those in and out of the story. Take this sequence. Coming back from South Georgia, Sam dropped by our apartment. The conversation drifts to wildlife in that area. He leads one of us to say that we had never seen a fox. And Sammy says, "Well, I happen to have one in my trunk." We said, "You don't?" He said he did, and he did. Or the time he took a naive young freshman cousin to a football game in Birmingham. He said we could do it on the cheap. We spent the night at UAB where he had studied the year before. We slept on one of the 20 cots on which the interns grabbed a couple of hours sleep. He said, "Just follow me and act like you're supposed to be here." He then accidentally, or not, led me into the female sleeping section. We quickly backed out. Then he accidentally, or not, led me into the dissection area, producing a whole new set of lasting images for this naive cousin. He created a memory that has lasted 60 years. That's what Sam could do. He created memories created by Sam. Many of you have these same memories, similar ones. Therefore, we will never forget him.
Good morning, brothers and sisters in Christ, and as friends gathered here to celebrate the life of the extraordinary, wonderful, amazing Sam Pate. My name's Kathleen Amos, and I'm a former student of Nan's and a lifelong friend of Nan and Sam's. Nan has asked us to join her in first this morning expressing her heartfelt appreciation to the wonderful Columbus Hospice folks that have cared for Sam and walked alongside him these difficult last 3 years. To any of you and all of you that are here, your care and concern for Sam, your concern for his dignity and his comfort, and all you did to make that possible are truly, truly something that we have a heart of gratitude for. Secondly, the musicians today, gracing and blessing all of us, are very special to this church and to Sam and Nan as well. After learning that Sam and Nan watched this service on television and were very fond of the music of Ruslan and Ina, they made a trip to Columbus Hospice and at the foot of his bed gave him his own concert. Now to Sam. Scholar, naturalist, teacher, birder, adventurer, photographer, writer, mentor, friend, travel guide, and intrepid leader of innumerable camping trips for students and adults, Sam was an inspired and an inspiring leader, a learner, and a friend. He instilled in all who crossed his paths some of the DNA of his sense of wonder and delight in the natural world, a reverence for those places where God's handiwork is displayed. Sam achieved a remarkable 51 years of teaching. He is responsible for generations of students, not only having a greater love of nature, but an abiding curiosity and respect for it. Sam's special magic was that the spark of his enthusiasm took hold in all kinds of students, not just the science kids or the tree huggers, but the athletes and the musicians and everyone in between. Sam made it cool because Sam was cool. He was the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. His orbital pull was extraordinary. Lower school students at Brookstone were drawn into the special world of Mr. Sam Pate, all one word, through their weekly visits to his classroom in the upper school and quickly fell into under his spell. With a chuckle and a holy mackerel, Sam graciously received the offerings of wounded and dead creatures, snake skins, bones, hornet's nests, or anything else that had been found over the weekend or on the side of the road on the way to school, and whose skeptical mothers had been persuaded that, yes, Mr. Pate would definitely want to see this. Sam and Nan have been other kinds of teachers as well. In their remarkable partnership, Sam and Nan taught through their example what it means to live a life sharing what you care about with unbridled generosity and giving of yourself with no thought of gain. Theirs have been lives poured out fully into the lives and care and nurturing of others. Together, Sam and Nan have taught for nearly 100 years. The hearts and minds of generations of students have been blessed by their care. Their collective influence is wide and deep and across this country. While we're here today to celebrate Sam, I know in my heart that he would want it said that he could not have been who he was and done what he did had his beloved Nan not been who she is. You truly were the dynamic duo in love and in life, and the authors of so much good in so many lives. Sam continued to teach right up until the end of his life. In the face of loss of mobility, he did not indulge in self-pity or bitterness. In the face of debilitating, crippling pain, he taught patience and fortitude without complaint. He expressed gratitude and concern for those he cared about. He continued to tell his stories. He taught unfailing gentleness and was unfailingly a gentleman. Sam's life was a sermon, one lived with virtue, consistency, and grace. The Gospel Luke says quite clearly, "Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put in your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." From his heavenly vantage point, I believe Sam can now see clearly the impact of his long, rich, fantastic life. Upon Sam's joining the saints last Saturday morning, shortly after sunrise, I feel certain he heard first the words, "Well done." And I imagine shortly thereafter, a great chorus of barred owl calls from friends and family there to welcome Kid Pate home. I invite you now to stand as you're able and join me in affirming your faith with the Apostles' Creed memorized by Sam at the age of 7 as printed in your program. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. The third day he rose from the dead. He ascended into heaven and sitteth at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From hence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead. I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting.
We are here this morning to celebrate the life and work of Sam Pate, a morning that we knew was coming, but we didn't want to rush it. And on this late summer morning, there's another service of sorts being held. There's a hush over the forest. The mountain valleys are strangely quiet. There's little movement along the seashore and in the meadows. All of God's creatures have joined in a moment of silence to give thanks for their fallen friend. The mood is not one of sorrow, but rather of thanksgiving for this exceptional man, a human who communicated with the untamed beings of the woodlands better than almost anyone ever has, was their friend. Our hearts go out to Sam's family and literally thousands of friends who are together preparing ourselves to live life without Sam Pate. Especially do we need to express our love and encouragement to Nan, Sam's partner in an education enterprise which has seen few equals in its reach and depth. Over the past couple of years, as Sam and I have talked at length about a whole host of topics, I've come to appreciate more not only Sam's devotion to his profession, but how much pride he took in Nan's work as well. He was always honored to be a standby chaperone, to be a called-upon chauffeur, to be a constant companion as he led students with Nan on a different type of journey, but just as impressive. What this couple has done for our young people, and in fact, for all of us, illustrates what happens when someone is dedicated to her or his profession and cares not where the credit goes. Together, they've been the dream team, and I shudder to think how poor our community and all of us would have been had they not come our way. So as we honor Sam's life in this service, let us remember to express our love to Nan as well. The example they've left for us will pay dividends forever. Sam was a man who loved his family, especially his Nan. He loved his Lord, he loved his country, he loved his chosen profession of teaching, and he loved the Auburn Tigers. He fell short by 12 hours of getting to the start of the football season, but there are those of us who saw his handiwork in the final outcome of that first game. Sam took the back door to influence somebody, and we know how he did that. We all know that he was meant to be a teacher. From his days teaching junior high school students who were captured by his hands-on approach, using their own pets and favorite animals to teach them, to his years of a full range of students, youngsters of all age, and many parents along for the ride who had some adventures across the length and breadth of North America that influenced their lives and in many cases their careers. Sam was a teacher. One former student said, "Mr. Pate tricked us into learning. He made it fun and meaningful." Our response is we should pray that all teachers have such magic in their skill set. Sam Pate was cut from a different cloth. One would think he was unapproachable, a bear of a man. His focus was on his wilderness creature of the moment, and his goal was to engender within all who would listen the example of how to be a friend to our fellow beings, human and otherwise. His early ambitions were a little fuzzy. He had grown up watching his grandfather practice medicine the old-fashioned way, going from house to house with his horse and buggy, treating patients. And his fishing trips with his father often turned into a time for Sam to gather artifacts of ancient peoples, much to his father's chagrin. His interest in science after college led him to apply and gain admission to medical school, where he invested a year of his life only to discover that he really wanted to prepare himself as a teacher. Because of Sam, our understanding of and empathy for our feathered and furry friends took a giant leap forward. For Mr. Pate did not just observe nature, he talked to it, and it responded. From this day forward, when we encounter the majesty of a red-tailed hawk, hear the haunting refrain of the barred owl, or watch the simple feeding of the Carolina chickadee, we will instantly think of Sam Pate. If ever a mortal wrote his own eulogy, that man was Mr. Pate. We knew Sam by many names. You've heard he grew up as Sammy. We knew him as Mr. Pate and Sam and teacher. I called him Professor. He had the complete package of teaching and loving what he did. Sam was a walking, talking, wide-open advocate for Mother Nature's vast family. He served a higher power in the forest and in the city, pointing out the beauty and importance of one creature after another and creating in us a need to follow his example. Make no mistake, Sam Pate was a master teacher. Students left his classes with their memories loaded with images, understandings, acronyms to remind them of the basic facts. Usually without even knowing, they would retain those teachings forever. Those of us who spent very much time with Mr. Pate stood the chance of receiving the Holy Mackerel Award. The Holy Mackerel Award was of two extremes, one on each end of a scale of accomplishment. When Mr. Pate was impressed with something you discovered, something you accomplished, he would say, "Holy mackerel." On the other hand, if you made a rookie mistake, misspoke about one lesson or another, you might receive the same award, but with an inflection which was hard to miss. Holy mackerel. But I hope you know what he meant on both occasions. He was saying he valued your work, you and your work, that he was glad you were in his pack. You were singled out for encouragement by the master teacher. Simply put, untold thousands of lives were impacted for the better by the evangelical fervor of Sam's understanding of the wondrous creatures with which we share this small blue dot in the universe. From students in his classes to field trips to cross-country adventures on both sides of the country, including at least 3 excursions to Alaska, the spotting and pursuit of exotic creatures which were seen or reportedly seen along the way, Sam taught life. He taught perseverance and tenacity and creativity and compassion and a whole new set of ways to enjoy and conserve our surroundings. Mr. Pate was a man with a story of many parts. His was a story of life, a rambling, winding, giggle-filled, often mischievous yarn, true enough to be sure, which revealed a man with a soul and an instinct to connect. If his verse rhymed, it was purely by accident, but it was undeniably poetry in motion. Oh, the sights he has seen and the memories he has made. Rudyard Kipling, in his epic poem, If, spoke to Sam's heart when he challenged us to walk with kings nor lose the common touch. If Professor Pate ever met a stranger, that was only a momentary and temporary condition. In their adopted part-time home in Maine and here in our city, Sam and Nan were often in the company of some of the world's upper crust, notable industrialists, prize-winning authors, and just regular folks who got the same personal attention that you and I so enjoyed. Sam loved to tell of a dinner or two with the Rockefellers and McCulloughs, McCullough being David McCullough, of Pulitzer Prize fame for his books John Adams and 1776 and other works. Dinners which famously went into the wee hours. Yes, imagine that. Yes, that was our Sam, comfortable in most any setting, but not ever in a showing off way. It was just Sam. If it were possible to identify every former Sam Pate student who has served, is now serving, or is preparing to serve his or her fellow man in a wildlife-related profession, in a life of science in service, or who is simply better prepared to volunteer to be a teacher to her or his children, transmit an appreciation for our world, the effect of that measurement would be astonishing. But the amazing truth is very simple. The reach of Sam Pate is impossible to describe. He was constantly teaching, whether on the run on a back road somewhere, or as an aside in a planned lecture, or in the presence of the artifacts which surrounded his life. In all cases, we saw the one-on-one impact of this man with a heart of gold and an unquenchable thirst for seeking, finding, sharing meaningful experiences. We have all been changed. Sam would be embarrassed to hear this, for his goal was never to glorify Sam. It was always about his students of all ages and his irrepressible need to share the good news of Mother Nature. But Sam has, in fact, left a legacy. We are better than we were. We are so much more aware of our world, a world we must treasure, a world we must protect, a world we must understand lest we lose it. And that would be a horrible disservice to our man Sam and his incredible preaching of the gospel of nature and science. No doubt the world would have been lucky to have Sam as a physician, but in all honesty, it would be hard to match the impact on lives, the example he set for wildlife and wilderness and caring for each other that this little man from a little town in South Alabama brought to all who knew him. The animal world knows it's lost its champion, and we have a sense of that as well. Is there a new advocate in the wings? Sam has done more to prepare others to carry on his work than we might ever imagine. If there is a new leader to be named, that person will have her or his work cut out for them. For Sam Pate was not a mortal man in the sense of his devotion to teaching. His life was complex, yet simple. He walked the walk every day, and he made room in his work and his heart for those who would treasure the world in which we live. Several years ago, another man of the people, broadcaster Charles Carrault, closed out his career as host of CBS Sunday Morning with this poem by Clarence Day. Farewell, my friends. Farewell and hail. I'm off to seek the Holy Grail. I cannot tell you why. Remember, please, when I'm gone, 'twas aspiration led me on. Tiddly widdly toodaloo, all I want is to stay with you. But here I go. Goodbye.
I'd like to share with you a quote which was one of Sam's favorites. I expect to pass through life but once. If therefore there be any kindness I can show or any good thing I can do to any fellow being, let me do it now and not defer or neglect it, as I shall not pass this way again. Sam Pate was the quintessential devotee of William Penn's quotation. As an academic science teacher, he imbued knowledge, encouragement, and inspiration to hundreds of youngsters. Teaching was not a job for Sam, rather it was a calling. He even withdrew from medical school to become an educator. His students were his sacred responsibility to encourage and educate. A sense of humor was not lost on Sam. Several years ago, he gave me a remarkable photograph that he had taken himself. He gave it to me under the proviso of absolute confidentiality. You see, it was a picture of Herschel Walker scoring a touchdown in Jordan-Hare Stadium. There are many teachers who show us how to live, but rare ones who show us how to die. Sam, we're grateful for your teaching our children many lessons of life and for your general dedication to making our community just a better place to live.
It's an honor, excuse me, it's an honor for Raymond and myself to share with you a few things about Sam's relationship with Auburn University, of which we are also very fond. Nan can attest. There have been many war eagles over the phone during football games. Nan could not even hear me for all the noise in the stadium, but it was wonderful. There was a time they were coming home from Maine, and I was screaming so loud into the phone. Nan and Sam were in two different cars, and we were relaying what was going on in the ball game. Sam had a very special relationship with Auburn and spent many happy years there and had many wonderful memories that, of course, he loved to share with all of us, and we loved hearing those stories. Sam especially loved football, and he was fortunate enough to witness Auburn winning 2 national championships. Fancy that. Sam was a great character builder, and his life epitomized the Auburn Creed, which has been very special to a number of us. The Auburn Creed was written by George Petrie, Auburn's first football coach, and its words are just beautiful, and I would like to share those with you at this time. I believe that this is a practical world and that I can count only on what I earn. Therefore, I believe in work, hard work. I believe in education, which gives me the knowledge to work wisely and trains my mind and my hands to work skillfully. I believe in honesty and truthfulness, without which I cannot win the respect and confidence of my fellow men. I believe in a sound mind and in a sound body, and a spirit that is not afraid, and in clean sports that develop these qualities. I believe in obedience to the law because it protects the rights of all. I believe in the human touch, which cultivates sympathy for my fellow men, and mutual helpfulness and brings happiness for all. I believe in my country because it is a land of freedom and because it is my own home, and that I can best serve that country by doing justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly with my God. And because Auburn men and women believe in these things, I believe in Auburn and love it. And for Mr. Sam Pate, I do have to say a big war eagle.
Thank you. Instead of Amazing Grace, we could have said Amazing Sam Pate, because he was an amazing fella. This morning, something happened when I was out walking our pooch, surrounded by owls talking to each other. We usually have 1 or 2, but in every direction, I could hear the barred owl saying, "Go take care of Sam." Sam Pate and I'm not a bird person, I'm a football person, and he and I talk football. He was telling me back when he was in college, which was API, not Auburn University, he went to all the ball games. One year, they won all of them and became national champs. That day they announced, "We will present the trophy at the stadium to the school." Sam was on the front row, and he told me about it many times, how much he enjoyed it. Over a period of years, he went to a lot of the games and then got sick, and he was confined to a wheelchair. Well, bless my soul, Auburn won a national championship. They were going to have a big presentation at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Sam wanted to go, trying to figure out. Our team got together and got him to Auburn. Our team got him in a wheelchair and rolled him into the stadium where he could watch the presentation of the trophy and the plaque. Saturday night, as people go into the stadium, the announcer will come out and say, "Look at section so-and-so." They'll open the cage, and the War Eagle will circle the field, and the fans will be hollering, "War Eagle," and Sam Pate will be leading them. So whenever you hear that game, War Eagle, Sam will be up there. And I still believe last Saturday night, he helped the guy catch the ball for the winning touchdown. Thank you.
I am not going to be the only one who cries, so I'm going to read this with no tears shed. Sam Pate was a man of outstanding character, intelligence, and a huge personality. No one could stand in his presence without a smile. Sam always strived to be a successful human being. How does one measure success? Listen to the words of one of Sam's favorite poems by Emerson. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know that one life has breathed easier because you lived here. This is to have succeeded. In my opinion, anyone who knew Sam knew that he was a man who was truly successful in every aspect of his life. And I hope that somewhere Sam is with Millie and Lucy and all those other black labs walking along Penobscot Bay. We love you, Sam.
While thinking of Sam during the past few weeks, the words "indomitable spirit" kept entering my mind. The reason for this is that I never heard Sam complain about his health situation while dealing with the painful effects of arthritis, multiple surgeries, MRSA, and even burning trips on bumpy roads. Early last week, while reading a book which Sam and Nan gave to me, I found a parallel to how Sam dealt with the pain and debilitating effects of his illnesses and his declining health. In the book entitled Life List, Remembering the Birds of My Years, famously named main author John N. Cole describes his experiences with 34 birds that are special to him. One of these birds is the diminutive black-capped chickadee, Bocile atricapillus, for you former Sam Pate ornithology students. It is the state bird of Maine and Massachusetts, again, for your former Hey Kid ornithology students. Of this bird, the author writes, "Through the bitter cold of winter's darkest days, the chickadee prevails. Quite unafraid of man or beast, it cocks its black-capped head and looks straight at every visitor, its tiny jet black eyes aglow with bright evidence of an immortal, unquenchable inner spirit. While in home health care and hospice, Sam repeatedly showed his indomitable spirit while talking with someone on the phone and interacting with visitors in the health care and hospice staff. One particular example of his unquenchable inner spirit is when he made his one last rendition of his famous and very effective barred owl call. Shortly after Sam's death last Saturday morning, one of the great ironies of fate occurred when Raymond South and I saw a great blue heron fly across Moon Road and land on top of the front roof of Columbus Hospice. Catherine Trotter, Catherine South, and Kim Rozicki also saw the bird as it flew over the courtyard beside Sam's room. The bird may have come to say goodbye to Sam, or, as suggested by my wife Margaret, may have been Sam saying goodbye to Nan and the close friends who were present.
As Sam's friend and former colleague, I'm honored to be with you here today to celebrate the life of a man well loved. Sam Pate touched each of us in different ways. His reach was broad and deep. Please stand, if you're able, if Sam was your teacher. Please stand if because of Sam, you look for a red-tailed hawk as you drive to Atlanta on I-185. Stand if you have ever gone to Wakulla Springs. Stand if you have a Peterson's Field Guide, and if there is anyone left standing, please stand if your appreciation for the world around you was enhanced by his commitment to nature. What a testament to his legacy. Please be seated. Teacher, traveler, birder, and naturalist, Sam Pate was one of a kind. He shared his appreciation for the environment with his students, his colleagues, and the community in which he lived. Sam used the world around him as his classroom. Whether at a football game or at field day, he inevitably saw a heron or a hawk and pointed it out to the people around them so they too could enjoy his enthusiasm for God's creations. Sam was a humble man, never seeking recognition or praise. As the chair of environmental science at Brookstone School, Sam was recognized by the Parents Association, the administration, and his students for his depth of knowledge and his commitment to teaching. For years, every school view book featured Sam's room. Animal skulls, wild turkeys, coyotes, and such were always found in Sam's room. For those brave souls who opened the freezer in Sam's classroom, a variety of critters would be ever present. It was not unusual for an assortment of roadkill to be left at Mr. Sam Pate's classroom every Monday morning.
Sam would use those specimens to enhance the lesson for that day, and once again teaching the students all about the world around them. Sam and Nan have an uncanny ability to befriend famous people. Authors, astronauts, political figures were all in the Pate circle of friends. Chief among those folks would be Pulitzer Prize-winning author David McCullough. First connecting in Maine, the Pates developed a relationship with McCullough and his family that grew over the years and resulted in McCullough making a visit to Columbus. As amazing as that event was, the follow-up was even more fantastic. Because of his friendship with the Pates, Mr. McCullough hosted a Brookstone field trip to Boston to watch the HBO filming of John Adams. I was one of the fortunate ones who was able to go on that trip. Picnics at Adams' farm in Quincy, bus rides through Boston with McCullough as the tour guide, and a visit to Doris Kearns Goodwin's home in Concord, Massachusetts were just a few of the highlights. Once again, the world around us was used as the classroom. Days before Sam's death, Mr. McCullough called to check in on his friend and to thank him once again for the magic carpet ride he received while visiting Columbus. Long before the trip to Boston, Sam was leading cross-country adventures for his students. He would pack up his station wagon and head west to share the wonders of this magnificent country with those fortunate enough to accompany him. Fishing, birding, and exploring were all on the syllabus, but beyond the advertised activities, relationship building and camaraderie inevitably occurred between the leader and his disciples. Hundreds of students recount these experiences with great joy. They attribute Sam with teaching them about life, and they thank him for molding them into the adults they have become. Sam's influence was life-changing. Once at Brookstone, Sam established the ever-popular Wakulla Springs field trip for his environmental science and ornithology students. This semi-annual offering rapidly became the school's most popular off-campus opportunity. Former students, parents of current students, and all faculty wanted to accompany Sam on these trips. Once again, Sam was using the world around him as his classroom. West Indian manatees, white-tailed deer, river otters, alligators, egrets, osprey, wood ducks, and bald eagles can all be found in and around Wakulla Springs. Sam's knowledge of these creatures was extensive, and he wanted to share it. Of all the classes Sam taught over the years, I would venture to say ornithology might have been his favorite. He wanted to share his appreciation for birds with his students, allowing them to recognize them in flight or simply chirping to welcome spring. There's no way to know how many birders Sam influenced, but certainly hundreds of former students still have their field guides, which served as the textbook for Sam's ornithology class. I have even heard of one former student who designed a periscope-type device to attach to his car so he could observe birds while driving. Some years ago, Brookstone established the Sam and Nan Pate Award as a lasting tribute to these educational legends. The award recognizes the faculty member, coach, or staff member whose commitment to the students has been exemplary. Special consideration is given to those individuals who have made an indelible impact on the culture and traditions of the institution, and to those who are known for introducing students to subjects that develop into passions. These criteria acknowledge the contribution the Pates made to Brookstone. The award recipient is announced annually at the final faculty meeting, and the coveted award includes a book from Sam and Nan's extensive collection handpicked for the winner. Many of us have been the recipients of Sam and Nan's abundant kindness, invitations to their home in Maine, treats before final exams, personalized cards featuring Sam's photographs, and gifts for all occasions, even Christmas in July. Their kind-heartedness is genuine and impossible to replicate. Once, while recovering from knee surgery, I was treated with a special delivery from Sam. He arrived in a full-length yellow slicker, complete with matching hat, as if he was the Gordon fisherman, bearing a lobster dinner for Perrin and me. Who other than Sam would have such an outfit or be so thoughtful? Regrettably, I never had Mr. Sam Pate as a teacher, but because he married my dear friend Nan, Sam and I became friends. Over the years, my appreciation and love for Sam has grown. I've enjoyed his stories, been the beneficiary of his knowledge, and spent time with him at his beloved home on Penobscot Bay. I watched him endure the pain and discomfort of Mercer from his hospital bed in Portland and have accompanied him to rehab in Phoenix City following surgery. In these situations, and in the past few weeks, Sam's courage and fortitude have been always present. His example of how to face adversity will remain with me always. Upon receiving the news about Sam, friends and relatives from across the country have called to express their sympathy, and I'd like to share some of those thoughts with you now. His cousin Joe Pate said, "Sam was my hero when I grew up next door to him as a child, and he still is today." Wayne Gallups, a former Hardaway High School student, commented, "I will remember Sam as a kind and gentle soul who poured his life into the lives of others. He was a sterling example of what a great teacher should be." Mary Santiago, one of the Pate's dear friends from Maine, said, "Sam was the kind of man everyone wanted as their father." Another Maine friend, Captain Jack Moore, and his wife Barbara remarked, "We have no words, just the most amazing memories of a man who changed lives. We can only hope to honor his memory by inspiring the people we meet to live better lives." His Brookstone colleague, Dr. Jim East, said it best, "Profound. Sam Pate gone." In thinking about Sam, my mind likens him to a modern-day John Muir. His commitment to Mother Nature and all of her creatures mirrored that of the great naturalist. Sam, better than most, understood what Muir meant when he said, "In every walk with nature, one always finds much more than he seeks." Thank you, God, for our dear friend Sam. Please hold him in the palm of your hand.
Educators, we don't love redundancy in a lot of our work, but today we do. There are so many common themes and threads through all these remarks. I do feel a little out of place as a Georgia Bulldog. Thank you, Raymond. I sat next to Sam a couple weeks ago, and he was showing me his hardbound book of photographs from his travels and wildlife. And he kept kind of motioning for me to get to the back of the book, and I turned to the last page, and there was another photograph. I said, "Yeah, that's cool, Sam." And he said, "No, turn to the back. Close the book." And I did. And there was a photograph of Herschel Walker scoring against Auburn. And he, knowing that I'm a Georgia fan, knew how much that would mean to me. And that was just the way he was. He was always, to his last breath, offering gifts to the rest of us. This sounds blasphemous, but when I came to Brookstone in 2003, and I learned that Mr. Pate took 2 full school days to take field trips of 50, 60 upper school students, many of whom didn't need to miss school. When I heard that Sam took them to Wakulla Springs, I thought that was really a waste of educational time, that those kids should be sitting in class and studying. And so I expressed my concern about that. 2 full days of school to go on a field trip. I expressed my concern to Wendell McKenzie, and he just kind of said, why don't you go on that field trip yourself and see what you think? So I did. That day was a day that I'll never forget. Traveling down Florida Highway 61, one of the kids on the trip yelled and said, that's a red-tailed hawk. Sam ordered the bus to stop. So we pulled off the side of a little 2-lane highway in Florida. We disembarked and all looked for that hawk. And sure enough, it flies over the trees. And what I witnessed that day was this remarkable teaching moment for kids who, some of whom were pretty reluctant students, and they were in the grasp of a master teacher. Later that day, and I'm not a birder, but I was with Sam, and we were watching an anhinga swim and fish, and he taught me all about that bird that day. And there hasn't been a moment since when I've seen an anhinga and I haven't thought of Mr. Sam Pate. He turned my wife, who really doesn't even like to perspire, so she's not an outdoors person, he turned her into a birder of epic proportions. And I know there are hundreds of stories like that. Thousands, maybe. What I witnessed that day in the fall of 2003 was the chemistry between a great teacher, curious students, and the natural world. I watched those students who were not great traditional students learn to love learning. What can't be lost and hasn't been lost in all of our reflections about Sam is his amazing sense of innocence and joy. I think that's what drew him to kids of all ages. I've seen amazing teachers throughout my career, but I've never seen anybody who could teach someone from 4 years old to 80 in the same way Sam could. He could reach literally all of us. I witnessed Sam's sense of joy on many occasions, but one leaped to mind. I had the privilege of sharing a once-in-a-lifetime experience with him, thanks to Nan. Nan had come up with we've heard David McCullough's name invoked a couple times, and Nan had come up with the idea that we should invite Mr. McCullough to Columbus and to Brookstone to speak. He lived in Martha's Vineyard, but the Pates had gotten to know him in Maine just a little. Sam and Nan had introduced themselves to him, and they came up with the idea that he should come to Brookstone to speak. Even then, and this was 15 years ago, his speaking fee was incredibly high. So, I thought there was no way we could pull this off. But of course, I never said no to Nan. And so, we embarked on this journey to invite David McCullough to come to Brookstone. So the Pates, with the help of Kathleen Amos, concocted an elaborate face-to-face invitation that included sweet tea and caramel cake. Mr. McCullough, of course, said yes to the invitation. But his schedule was very complicated, so we had to figure out how to get him to Columbus in a way that fit into his very tight, complex schedule. And it became pretty clear that the only way to do that was to get a private plane to go pick him up in Martha's Vineyard and then deliver him back to his home after he was done here in Columbus. Don Leeburn and Georgia Crown came through with the offer of the company jet. And Sam and I, Nan anointed Sam and I to be the persons who would go and pick up Mr. McCullough. I'm not sure if Sam had ever flown on a private jet before. He probably had, but the experience was not one I was used to, and he and I were like little kids on this private jet. We thought we were so important, but we were nervous too. We were nervous about meeting David McCullough and spending an hour or two in the plane with him on the way back. Frankly, I didn't know if he was a nice guy, and I'm a historian, and I was a little nervous that he would start asking me questions about history and I wouldn't be able to answer them. Thankfully, Mr. McCullough could not have been more kind or approachable or genuine. But here's the truth. I didn't get a word in edgewise on that flight back because he and Sam carried on for 2 hours, and it was just joy to sit back and watch those two banter back and forth. When we got Mr. McCullough settled back into his hotel here in Columbus, Sam and I were together, and he just beamed, and he went, as Catherine said, "Now that was a magic carpet ride." For me, a magic carpet ride is an apt metaphor for Sam, his life, and his career. He spent his life doing what he loved, celebrating and studying the natural world, and sharing that passion with his friends. You see, all of us, his students, his colleagues, his peers, we were his friends. Finally, he knew that he had hit the lottery in life with Nan. I can just hear Sam say, "Holy mackerel, I'm a lucky man." Or as he uttered his last words last week to Mr. McCullough, "Perfect, perfect, perfect."
They put me last. I'm actually going to start by reading some comments from Duncan Fletcher, who couldn't be here today. Duncan and I took Mr. Pate's ornithology class our sophomore year of high school, and so QB was right by my side as we took a journey with Mr. Pate. And so, unfortunately, you're going to get a double dose of Dreelan, and you'll just have to put up with it. But here we go with Duncan. One of the things Mr. Pate used to say to us was that you should never be bored while you were outside. He would explain that all around you there are new and interesting things to take in. All you had to do was look. And if you were bored, it was because you were not taking advantage of the opportunities in front of you to see something new. After reflecting the past few days on the man who will always be my favorite teacher and one of the great influences on my life, I've realized a deeper look at this simple statement reveals a great deal about the kind of person Mr. Pate was and the type of impact he had on so many people, especially me. Mr. Pate could not understand how you could be bored while being outside because he saw the world through different eyes. He had an ability to notice and appreciate detail far beyond what most of us see when we look at what many may dismiss as another animal, tree, or body of water. Mr. Pate noticed the beauty in a bobwhite quail perched on a log, an anhinga diving below the surface of the water, and a field trip out west, somewhere that deserved a pause on a road trip. His fascination with this beauty was inspiring and contagious to me because of his unquestionable love for it. He noticed more when he looked at our world, and thankfully, he had an incredible gift for remembering the details of these things that he had seen. This ability to see something more in something, coupled with a sharp memory for details of the experience, expressed themselves through his gift of stories. A quick story from Mr. Pate was never long enough for me, no matter how many times I had heard it. I still can't believe the way he captured my attention as a 17-year-old high school boy at the peak of my too cool phase. In Mr. Pate's classroom, I felt like a kindergartner sitting on the floor crisscross applesauce, hanging on to every word the teacher was saying. I was elated during the classes where he would take us through his slides of the photos he had taken, sharing his adventures and knowledge with us. Looking back, I'm amazed at how much I learned through those stories. Years later, I am left with all kinds of facts that he helped me appreciate the world around me in a different light. But more than the facts he gave me through his stories, Mr. Pate left me and many others with a desire to learn for ourselves. He gave us a passion of our own, a yearning for discovery and learning of wildlife and nature that will go forward a lifetime, and that's to be celebrated. I'm so grateful for Mr. Pate's ability to notice things in our outside world, but more importantly, I am thankful for the way Mr. Pate noticed me. Similar to his ability to see something more in a moose swimming across a stream, Mr. Pate saw things in me that others tended to miss. It's hard to put into words, but Mr. Pate had a way of making me feel recognized. And he recognized me more than just the way that I sometimes felt labeled going to a smaller school. After graduating, we developed a friendship that I will always cherish. He appreciated me for who I was and made me feel cared for in a way that even at a younger age I know is special. There was never a conversation that I left without sore cheeks because of the amount of times he made me laugh with the way he could tell a joke. And I will never forget how excited I was to tell Mr. Pate about the woman I was to marry and the conversation we had a couple days before the wedding. He told me that if he could, he would ride a horse to Charleston to see our wedding, and to be honest, I really believe that he would have, because that's the way he cared. But I'm not the only one who's been impacted by Mr. Pate's ability to notice things when we tend to miss, both in nature and in ourselves. So many of us have benefited from this gift of his unique perspective and the contagious way he handled it with those around him. We have been inspired by his ability to see more in the world around him and are all thankful for the way he shared that with us. I was all smiles reading that last night. This is me now. I really tried to write something that captured Pate's enormous legacy, but the more I worked, the more his impact unfolded in front of me, growing and expanding to the point that it escaped beyond what I could capture by trying to describe it. So let me tell you a story instead. The first day of my sophomore year at Brookstone, I walked into Mr. Pate's classroom, and the first thing I saw was a barred owl staring back at me from the cage in the back of the room. Mr. Pate said, "Don't mind it. I found it hurt. I'm taking it to the Auburn Raptor Center later today. Just come in and take a seat." So all of us took our seats as the barred owl stared us down with its deep, dark eyes. As we sat down, we noticed the Peterson guides laid out on our tables, emblazoned by two northern flickers with their brilliant yellow wings. I spent the entire class flipping through that book, examining every single painting as my mind reeled from learning about these fantastical creatures that had always been around me, but who I had never noticed. I was amazed, yes, but if I'm honest, a little angry. I felt ripped off that I had been missing out on these wonders for the first 16 years of my life. Now, most birders have what they call a spark bird, a special bird that opened their eyes to the world of birds and fueled their passion to see as many birds as possible. Usually it's one of the many spectacular but just out of reach until you look birds, like a scarlet tanager or a Canada warbler. But that wasn't the case for me. I'd seen bald eagles, great blue herons, and all that good stuff, but they'd never produced that spark for some reason. We're fortunate here in Georgia to still be surrounded by such wildlife on a daily basis, unlike so many who these days grow up in concrete jungles or in front of various screens. This familiarity is a privilege, but all too often it blinds us to the daily wonders in our lives. A special kind of person is needed to turn familiar, overlooked objects into otherworldly beings whose majesty demands our attention. For bird lovers from Columbus, our spark bird wasn't a bird at all. It was Mr. Pate. There were never lectures, just stories, show and tell, and field trips. There were never multiple choice questions or essays, just making lists, drawings, or observations, like write down 100 things you know about a bird. We know more than we realize. Most times learning feels like work, but Pate's classes were innocuous to the point that they never seemed like it, just fun. We didn't realize or mind as he was doing it, but Mr. Pate was showing us the core tenets of studying natural history. All you have to do is look and listen and write something down. Even though Mr. Pate never needed a computer to teach, we do live in an exciting time where technology is facilitating natural history study in groundbreaking ways. Apps like Merlin Bird ID and iNaturalist can identify a bird or a flower from a picture and empower ordinary folks with knowledge that normally takes generations to acquire. But they can only go so far on their own. We'll always need mentors like Mr. Pate to open eyes and create sparks. The people who imagine and build these cutting-edge tools all had their own mentors, just like Mr. Pate. And by combining these new tools with Pate's wisdom, we can go on to be educators in our own capacities. A professor of mine once told me it's not about how many people you teach, it's about how many teachers you create. By that metric alone, Mr. Pate's legacy is enormous. Most naturalists consider themselves lucky if they're able to pass on their knowledge to one or a few successors in this age of nature deficit disorder. Mr. Pate inspired dozens of ornithologists and hardcore birders over the course of his career. Chris McClure, director of the Peregrine Fund's American Kestrel Conservation Program. Ryan Chitwood, who recently finished his master's at UGA on warbler populations in the southern Appalachians. Walt Chambers, ace birder who's found numerous mega rarities for the state of Georgia. Mason Jarrett, who's filled Pate's shoes as compiler of the Christmas bird counts for Eufaula and Columbus. All of them can trace their birding origins directly to Mr. Pate's kind influence. These are just a few of the ones I happen to know. There are more who I'm still learning about all the time. These folks have contributed greatly to ornithology, both nationally and locally, but knowing an alula from a cloaca is not the point. Studying birds, while lots and lots of fun, is not the point. Environmentalist Gus Speth put it best when he said, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that." The real impact of Pate's gigantic legacy is the thousands who had their appreciation for nature sparked by his sharp wit, incredible storytelling, and genuine passion for simply showing folks the wonder of birds and all the creatures we share a planet with. Thanks to him, there are many more people who care about these things in the world, people who speak up, people who set an example, and people who vote. It doesn't take a scientist to tell you that the world is in desperate need of such people, now more than ever. I had the privilege of visiting Alaska this summer. As everyone here knows, Pate's Alaska stories were always his best ones. The notion of loading a bunch of kids into a station wagon on a cross-country drive from Georgia to Alaska sounds like a nightmare of both the school health and safety departments and parent chaperones. But somehow Pate, through his sheer determination to give those kids an experience, was able to get them there and back safely with stories to last a lifetime. Something about the simple purity of those trips conjures a link to that deeply American sense of exploration and discovery. The feeling of not being tied to a script and not knowing what's around the next bend in the road. It could be a hawk's nest, a flat tire, a cougar, a waterfall, or even George Romney. You never know, and you'll have to keep going to find out. It was truly a special experience to retrace some of Pate's steps through Denali National Park and other parts of Alaska. There's much about Alaska that's unchanged. Fortunately, there are still vast expanses of wildlife, still moose, grizzly bears, wolves, caribou, killer whales, and bald eagles. But there are changes, too. I saw a hen white-tailed ptarmigan with her chicks at the top of a peak in the Chugach Mountains. She was fluttering her gular pouch, the bird equivalent of panting, during Anchorage's record heat wave and another summer of intense, raging wildfires. As her alpine habitat follows the warming temperatures up the mountain slopes, it will shrink higher up to the peak until there might be no more room left. In Kenai Fjords National Park to the south, there were swirling flocks of murrelets, puffins, and kittiwakes catching fish in the dark blue waters that stem from the enormous, yet continually retreating glaciers. Many of these seabirds are struggling with near total failure during the breeding season. Warming sea temperatures have caused fish to move away from their island breeding colonies, leaving little room for the birds to feed their young. At Utqiagvik, the northernmost town on the North American landmass, I visited the home of whale-hunting Inuits, courting sea ducks, displaying shorebirds, yodeling loons, and snowy owls of Harry Potter fame. It's a spectacularly alive place, practically vibrating with the energy of all the life there. The changes are almost too many to list. The town is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, along with the entire Arctic Circle. Not only does climate change threaten polar bears and bowhead whales, but the entire community of birds and indigenous peoples who depend on expanses of solid sea ice and pristine tundra too. I only bring up these profound yet troubling moments to share with you the wonder of what we have here and now, acknowledge the threats we face, and provide a necessary sense of urgency to tackle those problems head on. Despite the doom and gloom narrative surrounding environmental issues, Mr. Pate was never one for pessimism. It's been really awesome to hear from everyone about their sightings of bald eagles, great blue herons, and barred owls over the past week, and it's easy to forget that these birds were almost on the brink of extinction when Mr. Pate was at his peak activities. And he saw it all turn around thanks to the Endangered Species Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. In all my time with him, I never heard him say anything defeatist or imply that it wasn't worth all of it trying to save. There was only his relentless determination to share, to educate, and to make a difference for someone or something. We do have an important opportunity to make a difference for a wild place right here in Georgia right now. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge is currently under threat from a proposed mining project just outside its boundaries at Trail Ridge, the natural formation which helps maintain the hydrology of the swamp. Not only would the mine itself destroy important habitat for threatened species like gopher tortoises, but the Georgia Conservancy believes that it would have an impact on the water table of the Okefenokee and the headwaters of St. Mary's River. It's a rare thing to have an entire ecosystem that is virtually intact, fully functioning anywhere, let alone the East Coast. The Okefenokee is priceless in a way that can't be replaced or restored to its former condition once damaged or tainted by short-term gain. I encourage everyone who cares about barred owls and wild places to make your voices heard by submitting your comments to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers by September 12th, and to ask your family and friends to do the same. I have more information afterwards, if anyone feels like doing so. I know it can feel overwhelming. There's seemingly a nonstop litany of threats to vital places and an ever-growing list of endangered species. There are simple and individual and communal acts of good that can make a real positive impact and set an example for others while reminding us of our own power. But more importantly than any single action, I encourage us all to live by Pate's ethos. Seek out wild places, go see them now, take photos of anything weird or cool, take as many folks with you as you can, and share your experience with everyone else. Then do what you can to keep those places that way. Fortunately, you don't have to go somewhere remote or exotic to find wild things and wild spaces. Sometimes all it takes is the song of a wood thrush or a barred owl saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" There's something inescapable about hearing that sound and imagining a hunched shadow perched in the woods, perhaps freshly rehabilitated from the Auburn Raptor Center, ready to begin its nightly hunt. I think it's because barred owls ask us a question. It's an invitation to join a wilder world. It's Pate's question. Will you answer? We'll see you later, kid.
And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. Shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life, Say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock in whom I trust, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. For to his angels he's given a command to guard you in all of your ways. Upon their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your feet against a stone. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand, in the palm of his hand.
What more can I say than to you has been said? You and I go from this place with a fresh inspiration from the lives of Sam and Nan Pate, who became beloved friends and family in the stewardship of God's world. We leave this place a part of his legacy. Never let it die. Always see the freshness of a new day. Take every opportunity you have to turn aside from the distractions of the world to see the real beauty of the world in creation. Hear the voices. Tell the story. Teach others. Be the legacy for generations to come. When you are, Sam's legacy of life and influence never dies. So indeed, Sam Pate will get up in the morning, and Sam will go into the world, and he will do things through your lives because of his influence in your life. And as he does, even as while he had breath on this earth, at the end of the day, the world will be better because his influence was there, and you are a part of that. Indeed, God proceeds to create, and we're part of the message of that new creation day by day. Thank God for Sam Pate. Thank God for Nan. Thank God for memories and inspiration and love. Amen.
Would you pray with me? Eternal and gracious God, we thank you that your creation is good and wide and immensely beautiful. We thank you that you chose to create Mr. Sam Pate, and then he and Nan got to enjoy it together for many, many years. Now with Nan and sweet Bo and all who had the pleasure of loving Sam and being loved by him. In the great name of Christ we pray. Amen.
Please take your hymnals, turn to hymn number 310 as we stand and sing, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee.